So here we are. We're in the next section. And this section, we're going to just talk about one last difference between JSX and HTML. So this last little thing is what I would consider a very, well, perhaps the most important feature. So last but not least, as they say. So this is what we need to understand about JSX, because we're going to be working with this feature quite a bit throughout this course. So JSX can very easily reference JavaScript variables. You know that. Essentially, that means that we can take a JavaScript variable and easily print it up inside of our JSX block. So let's flip back over to our code editor and get a quick example of what this would look like. So inside of the app component, I'm going to create a new variable. And I'm going to create, let's say, const button text. And I'll give it the text of click me. And just like that. So now, if we want, we could refer to this text variable inside of our button in place of just putting the plain text of submit. Now, to do that, I would just delete that text, submit, and I'll put in a set of curly braces just like this. Now, the curly braces are not indicating a JavaScript object. So instead, the curly braces are indicating that I want to reference a JavaScript variable right here. So then I'll type out the name of the variable that I want to insert into this button, and then save this file, flip back over to the application at localhost 3000, and I'll see that. Now the button says, click me. So with this curly brace, we can very easily reference different JavaScript variables inside of our JSX. So we're not only limited to making very simple statements like this, obviously, when we define a single variable at a time and then reference it inside. We may define something like function get button text, and then anytime someone calls this function, maybe I will return hi there. Then inside of my button tag right here, rather than referring to text, I can delete that and call the function that we just created. So I'll say get button text like so. Now make sure you get the parentheses on here so that you can actually invoke the function. Excellent. So the other thing that I want to do is clean up that variable that we're no longer using. So let's save this and see how it goes. And it's the button, and it says, hi there. So now there's only a couple of limitations around what type of variable we can reference inside of these JSX blocks using these curly braces. Give you a couple of quick examples. So I want to tell you a little bit more about what different types of variables we can reference inside of JSX, specifically when we're trying to put something in here that's going to display on our screen as text or some other value. So first, let me begin by deleting that function that we just put together. And then I'm going to go inside of the app component. So I'll say const button text is hello world, like so. And then inside of our curly braces right here, I'll again replace it with button text. Okay, so now we don't have a function, and we do not need a set of parentheses. So it's just button text like so. All right, so very quickly, let's just save this file, and I just want to make sure that everything is still working. Okay, yeah, that looks good. If we want to, we can reference other types of variables rather than a string here. For example, I could instead replace this with a number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Flip back over, and we can see that the number's printed up here. And I could also replace this with an array of strings or numbers. I could do something like hello world, 2 strings inside of an array. So then if I save that and flip back over, you can see the two strings got pushed together and are essentially concatenated inside that button. And now if I want to, I could also replace it with a set of numbers like 5 and 12. I can then save this again, and I'll see 5 and 12. So we clearly have a pretty good amount of flexibility here, yeah? But there is one particular example of something that I do want to show you now that you know this, because I can almost guarantee that you're going to run into this bug at some point in time. So I'm going to replace the button text right here with a JavaScript object instead. This is just a plain object. And I'm going to give it a property of text, and I'll say submit. And I'm now going to save the file again. When I flip back over, we're going to see an error message. So now I want you to really have a look at this error message and have it imprinted in your memory, because I guarantee you're going to see this at some point in your React career. So the message says, objects are not valid as a React child, which means that we're trying to show an object, like a JavaScript object, inside of a React component as text, and React does not know how to deal with that. Okay, so obviously we're not allowed to take a JavaScript object and reference it inside of JSX, specifically where we would normally show text. We could very easily fix this by putting on a button text.text. So now that's going to refer to the text property of this object. And we can save this, and we'll see that it's working. Now, the reason that I put a lot of emphasis on that last part, saying that we can't show an object as text, is because technically we can't show a JavaScript object as an attribute on an element like this right here. Yeah? Good. So now that we understand the purpose of this curly braces syntax, we can get a good look at the style property and get a better idea of what's going on. So what we're doing here is we want to reference a JavaScript variable for this style property, and the value that we're going to pass to it is this JavaScript object. So if we wanted to, we could technically cut that thing out, create a new variable up in here called style, and assign the style object to it, and then reference that style down here, like so. And it would have the exact same effect. So clearly, we can use JavaScript objects as long as we're not trying to print them up as text or something like that inside of our application. All right, so you got me? That's pretty much it. So I'm going to undo this last little change and just leave it like that. Okay, so now, if you look at this diagram over here, I just showed the three important things for you to understand about the differences between HTML and JSX. But actually, it's kind of challenging for anyone to sit down and list out all of the exact differences between JSX and HTML. So I want to teach you something. I want to teach you a little trick about how you can figure out some of those differences between these two on your own without having to consult a chart or anything else. It's great detective work. I'll show you. So when I flip back over to our React application inside the browser, it looks like everything's running just fine. And we can see our content appear on the screen. However, what are we going to see when we open up the browser console? You can do it by right-clicking anywhere and then clicking on Inspect. So you'll see a window like this appear, either on the bottom of the screen or the right-hand side. And at the top of this panel, find the Console button. When you click on that, you're going to see a big red warning like the one that I see right here. Do you see it? So this is a warning coming from the React library, and it says invalid DOM property 4. Well, didn't you mean HTML4? Like I said, at the end of the day, there's a whole bunch of other little differences between JSX and HTML. Many of these differences are not going to crash your application. Sometimes it's going to be a little bit of a challenge for you to detect when you've done something slightly wrong. So in order to detect when you've made a typo or referred to an invalid property, you should traditionally just leave your console open or at least reference it every now and again. And then React is going to look at every single different property that you're trying to pass to elements inside of your JSX blocks. And then that way, if it ever sees that you're trying to pass an invalid property, it's going to show you a warning message like the one that you see right here. So this warning message is essentially telling us that our label right here has an attribute name of 4, and React doesn't want to deal with that. It actually wants us to replace it with the HTML 4, the capital F, like so. So why is that? Well, it's a very similar reason to the class name, the one that we used earlier. For some different browsers or some different tooling, it's going to incorrectly see this. 4, the word right here, is incorrectly interpreted as a traditional JavaScript for loop, like so. So, as I said earlier, it's not really an issue. As you just saw a moment ago, our application works in the browser just fine without error, but nonetheless, the requirement is still encoded in the React library. So, we have to replace it with HTML4. Now, if I do that and save this, flip back over, and I'll see that the warning message just went away. All right? So anytime that you see a warning message from React like that, something that says, did you mean to do this? Well, usually it's going to mean that you accidentally put together an invalid property name somewhere inside of your JSX. So I want to take a break here, and we'll continue in the next video. I promise you, it's going to be terrific.